Hello, I'm Rachael from Echidna Sewing, and thanks for joining me in creating something special with our 2024 community project, Flowers in the Sun. We'll be joining forces once again with sewists, embroiderers and crafters throughout Australia to create a patchwork quilt in support of the Australian Melanoma Research Foundation. The AMRF is a not-for-profit charity organisation that supports research, awareness and early detection of melanoma, the most deadly form of skin cancer. Our aim for this community project is to create a symbol of hope and solidarity for all those who have been touched by melanoma and a reminder of the need for more research and action to fight this disease. Creating Flowers in the Sun nudges us to remember the significance of being sun smart in our sunburnt country and serves as a timely reminder to get regular skin checks. This project is also a fun way to challenge yourself and learn some new creative techniques and let your craft shine to create something meaningful. So, the big question is, how can I contribute? Like we did in 2023, participation is open to any creator in Australia. All you need to do is choose which type of block that you'd like to make, create your piece and then send it in to us. There are 5 types of different blocks you can choose from. So you can choose an HTV block, so that's heat transfer vinyl. There's sewing machine applique. We have machine embroidery, of course, and we have 2 different styles of machine embroidery applique for you to choose from. From March to June 2024, we're going to show you how to create each block using the different techniques. So get your creating mojo on and let's get started. Today we'll be creating 2 blocks using your embroidery machine. The first block we're creating, it's the quickest and it's also the easiest, and it's the embroidered block. These are all the items that you'll need to stitch along with me. So you'll need to download your design from our website and put it onto a USB. The background fabric, this is what I'm using, and we've chosen a whole bunch of blues and solids. You will need to use a blue background fabric. You may have something suitable in your stash, and that's fine, but our preference is to use a solid fabric. We've used a yellow Hemingworth embroidery thread and also a black Hemingworth embroidery thread with your pre-wound bobbins in both black and white. We're also using as our stabiliser a soft away tearaway. The other things you'll need to cut your fabric is your rotary cutter, a ruler, you'll need snips to cut your threads. I'll be pressing my fabric prior to cutting, so I've got my wool pressing mat, my mini iron and also my starch. Of course, the last thing that you'll need is your hoop. So you have an option to stitch it in a 4x4 hoop or a 5x7. So let me clear off the table and we will cut and press our fabric. One of the most important things that I like to do whenever I'm patchwork piecing or doing an embroidery design is I make sure that there are no wrinkles left in my fabric. And to do this, I use starch, and I use a lot of starch. You can see this fat quarter has been folded up for quite a while, so there are some permanent creases in there. So I'm just going to spray. I'm not sure if you knew this about starch. You should spray and then leave it for about 30 seconds and then iron. That allows the starch to actually soak into the fibre of the cotton, and so it should press out those large wrinkles and makes it easier to cut, the fabric easier to work with, and it smells good. So I use the Heaven Scent spray starch, that's my preference, and probably sandalwood and lemon myrtle are my go-tos in my sewing room. So just do this one. I'm working with my 4x4 hoop today, so I don't need a large piece of fabric. It'll be the size that you'll need to cut for me though is way bigger than the hoop, because what we will be doing is once all these blocks are sent to us, we'll be cutting them down to create the quilt. So I'm going to ask you to cut an 11 by 11 inch square for this machine embroidery. And you'll need to cut that same size of your soft away tearaway stabilizer. So I'm going to grab my patchwork ruler. I always find the 1 and 1 in this corner. I know it needs to be 11 by 11. So you can see here, there's the 11 in the corner, 11 and here. So I know it's good for me to cut 1 and cut 2, so that's what I'll do. Put this aside. Then the next thing to cut is the stabilizer. Now it doesn't have to be 11 by 11 because the hoop is small. It's just easier to manage for me to cut that size and hoop it to show you. So let's do this. 1, 2. You may be thinking that's a large piece of fabric, and in all honesty it is. However, it will give us flexibility when everyone sends their blocks in for us to be able to trim them back easily to create the quilt. So I'm thinking ahead. So just undo my hoop, and I'm just going to what I affectionately call eyeball it. So that is because I know we have room to maneuver, keeping it as straight as possible and just gently pushing down. You can see that is pretty good. I will finger tighten the hoop up, and we are ready to go. Before we start stitching, I want to talk to you about one of the resources that's available. I'm not sure if you've ever looked at when you get an embroidery design, is your design worksheet. Now this is a really useful tool for you to use. There is lots of information for the design worksheet. So when a digitizer creates a design, they get or provide this information that tells you how large the design is, the number of stitches in the design, if there's any colour changes, the trims, but also the hoop size, the fabric type that we are stitching it on, but also the stabilizer. So we've got tearaway, and the recommendation is 2 pieces. So I can use an offcut as a floater underneath if I think that the design, because I've only hooped 1, and I would use that as a floater if I think it needs it as we're stitching. But further down you can see your colour sequence is goldenrod and classic black. Today I'm using sun just to make it different, and classic black. So let's go to the machine and start stitching. So I've selected my machine embroidery design from my USB. I've got my black thread and my black bobbin thread. I've got my thread snips. I've threaded the machine with my yellow sun thread, and obviously I've hooped up my background fabric. I've also got my spare piece of floating stabilizer, which I'm going to tuck under the hoop once she starts stitching if I think it needs it. So the next step is to start stitching. So my embroidery block has just finished. That was an 18-minute stitch out. It looks really good. I'm very, very happy with it. I'm going to unhoop it and get the rest of my materials together, because next up we're creating a machine embroidery applique. The second block that we're creating today is the machine embroidery applique. Don't worry if you don't have an embroidery machine, I've got you covered. We will be doing a sewing machine applique block in the next video. For the machine embroidery applique, there are a couple of extra items you will need in addition to what we just used for the embroidery machine stitch out. The type of applique we're stitching is called raw edge, and it doesn't have a satin stitch finish. So that means that we have to iron fusible webbing onto the back of each petal fabric. The products and equipment I've used to create this block is 7 different yellow colours, and I have got some hot melt web or fusible webbing for the back. I've downloaded my design and put it on a USB. The design I'm using is for multi-stitch out. If you wanted to do the stitch out in a single colour, you would choose single. I have a blue background fabric. It is in a solid, and this is the colour I'm using this time. This is the one I was using for my sample. And I have my stabiliser is Soft Away Tearaway. I also have a couple of options for scissors. So I'm using my small duckbill scissors from the Kimberbell scissor set, and I also have my applique scissors here, my snips for threads. The reason I have these 2 options is, as you can see on this sample, there are quite a few little hairs coming off, and that is because when I tested the block I didn't have any fusible web on the back, and so it's quite furry. And I also used a pair of snips, so I think I'll be refining the process with these. You'll also need a square piece of scrap black fabric for the flower centre, and an option that I use is some washi tape. The first thing I need to show you though is, let's have another look at our design worksheet. So this tells me that there are this many colour changes because I'm using 7 different fabrics. I'm going to stitch a placement, I'll put my fabric down, and then we will stitch around the petal, and then I will trim. So pure cotton fabric again, my topping is tearaway. We do have 2 we do state that the tearaway is 2 pieces, but I have only used 1 because it's not as dense as the machine embroidery stitch out, so I don't believe it needs 2 pieces. And then on the next 2 pages are just the colour sequences till we get to the end, and we will be placing the flower centre, tacking down the flower centre and stitching over the top. So let's start ironing with our fusible webbing on the back. But what I've done, and I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it with the bulk of these, so I've already pre-pressed some fusible webbing onto the back, but most of my fabric measures 2.5 by 3 to 4 inches depending on what scraps I had. So all I did was cut my fusible webbing or hot melt web to that size, and I will be ironing that on, but you can see that this one is too big. So I'm just going to quickly trim this off so I don't ruin my pressing mat, because this doesn't have to be perfect, as we will be trimming this down to the shape of the petal. So just iron this on. These are my last 2 pieces. I'll let that cool before I peel it back. Just make sure I've got the wrong side of the fabric. It does go onto the wrong side. Check my sizing before I iron. And this one is too big as well. Let's trim that down. And again, another microscopic amount so I don't get any fusible webbing onto my mat. And gently adhere that to the back of our fabric. Once your fabric has had the hot melt web attached and it's cooled a little, then we're just going to peel that off and put them on the pile. And peel this one off. It should just come apart easily. Okay, so we have all our elements ready to begin stitching. So I'm going to load my hoop in and we'll get started. So I'm starting with my duckbill scissors, and the way they work is this part pushes the fabric away as I'm trimming, so you can see, and it kind of nests quite close to the fabric. Do have to cut past the design, but they work really well. So I'm getting close but not cutting my stitching, which is really important, or the machine embroidery. But I can see already that the hot melt web has already made a difference to the raw edge of this applique. So it was the right choice to put the fusible on the back, and I am going to fuse it, but not till I've completed all of the stitch outs, all of the petals. It's pretty cute. One down, 6 to go. So here is the completed block. So that's the machine applique. You can see that the centre has been stitched quite densely, but in comparison to my test block, which is this one, using the hot melt web means that the edges are quite clean. If you don't have any hot melt web, one of the tips I can give you for making sure that you don't have edges as fluffy as those is you can use a spray starch and do that liberally prior to actually placing your embroidery, and then when you cut it, it might not fray as much. So we have created our first 2 blocks for Flowers in the Sun. So there's the machine embroidery applique, which is this one, in our 5x7 hoop, and our machine embroidery block in the 4x4 hoop. All you need to do now with these blocks is just remove the stabilizer. So tear that off the back, like so. And that's all you need to do. You don't need to trim the block down or do anything, because the more fabric that I have around these blocks, the more I can work with them to put them into the quilt. So once you've removed your stabilizers, like I'm trying to do quickly here, we will pop it in the post to us. And that's all that we need. So thank you for joining me. Please start creating, and I look forward to receiving your wonderful work in the mail.